because I'm really interested in the whole club notion as bringing it into the moment, the experience of being and being gay and not being gay, and how you're all feeling about that as well as myself, whoever's presenting. So that happens to be an aspect of this being a public event. And I also see it just as well on the street, that if I'm walking down the street and someone passes me, I always feel required by just the human truth of being an existent being, to recognize their being, acknowledge them in some kind of a basic way, no matter who they are. They can look rich or poor, they can look stinky or disgusting, or important or whatever. If they look too scary, look away. They can be threatening, they can feel threatened if you look at them. So you're helping, you're supposed to be looking at them if you don't look at them, those people. Other than that, see, I know my types on the street. I'm a street walker, of course, of generations. At this point, I've been walking the same little streets for generations, literally generations, by this time. Neither here nor there, but there are some aspects that tie up in ways that are, I think, relevant to things that are being struggled with right now, and into the future as well. And perhaps as we share stuff, you might have some feelings about that, or connecting yourself personally in some way or other. And please be aware that later on, if we get a little time, I'll invite you to share if you feel gutsy enough or whatever. You might kind of get into that. Okay. So supposedly, I'm talking about the practice of becoming gay shamanism, which is the topic of the second chapter of this book. So the first chapter, Visionary Love, is more of the basic ideas, and then in the second chapter, Becoming Gay Shamanism, I'm more interested in actually writing about how it is I'm trying to practice and live, by which I mean live day in and day out, with the ways, with the experiential equivalents of the ideas that can be written about as ideas or concepts. I'm trying to figure that out better, actually do that in a way that is taking me, rather than I'm understanding and I'm controlling it, but rather it's taking me into this direction. And I'm not trying to be willy-nilly about it, or just whatever comes to me, I'm going to be pulled by it, as I've learned long ago how to work with my own psychology. So there were all kinds of forces and feelings that I feel pulled on, but I'm talking about becoming more gay. What does it mean if the gayness in you says to you, I want you to become more gay? That's a more difficult kind of thing. If I'm going to treat that seriously, then I find that it responds seriously. If I treat it silly, it doesn't take me seriously either. And so I have my choice. I'm always given the choice that if I choose the more serious way, it doesn't get around. So I get sucked eventually into the serious whirlpool, but it doesn't lead to nowhere, or just insanity or schizophrenia or whatever. I become a practitioner of a contemporary gay shamanism. So I don't mean that by that point, by the time I'm writing this essay in 1977, or for the several years after that, including this whole book, then really, or by the time I'm writing like the introduction and finishing up with my friends, I'm considered a practicing gay shaman of a role moral sort, when there aren't such people yet. And I relate myself that way, and I relate to others that way. So if I share with you some from this book, it's to share with you what it was like back then, and how I was, and how others were relating to me, and how they were. We're all activists, we're all working in this fringe of the fringe, maybe the way to describe it, that we're all extremely anti-establishment. None of us have regular jobs, for example, or any of that kind of involvement in the system, something now we couldn't imagine. that's a given for the world that I lived in at this time. My job had been to be a student. Excuse me. But it's because I was a very good student, so I was getting paid a lot of money to be a student. Not only was it not costing me money to go to school. But after I got my master's degree, that was it. So that would have been in April of 1975. And the normal track would be after you get your master's degree, you then get your license and you become a practitioner. And I was set up for that, and so I had the Don Clark above me as a PhD level, you see, and he could guide me, and I was being guided on a master's degree and all that. It looked great, it looked fabulous. It looked like I was on just a terrific track to be getting some kind of tremendous fulfillment. There was only one slight hitch in the problem, which in the scene, which was the problem that what originally should have gone in that scene was what became the book, Men Loving Men, which I explained when I presented that book. That was my original master's thesis. So I'm busy working on it, and I'm on, like, I don't know what, the ass-fucking chapter, let's say. I'm serious about this. And I get called to the dean's office, and she gives me this real sincere look, and she says, you know, I know you work really hard on this, but wait, it's not acceptable. Sorry, you've got to do something else. Get us off the hook and do something else. Quick. You want to graduate in April? This is like maybe December, late November maybe. If you want to graduate, it's by April. And please, because there's something else. Maybe I could do a monogrammer now. No, entirely something else. Sister, she's in a habit. I kid you not. She was the dean of the school. So they've been so worked up over Men Loving Men. You see, it seems quite innocuous now, but to the Sisters of the Sacred Heart, sucking cock, the techniques of getting rimmed are not in the Sisters' orbit. They blew all their gaskets. Every last fucking gasket they possibly had was blown by that. And I was a radioactive kryptonite. So I was in a real pickle, and I've been shared before in another meeting, earlier meeting. Then the awful depression swung me into, because I had no idea, you know, it was like what all I had worked on and written was not going to work. And what was I going to do now? What master's thesis was I going to do? And it was going to them at the same time that my partner, lover of the time, left me to return to his young wife and 2 little babies to live with them. And so I was plunged into this very depressive state that I've related before, and it was a coincidence that I was in this state, and this happened to be sitting in the living room one day, and the television was on, and there came on this Frankenstein television version, and the doctor wasn't writing the bandages, and I was waiting, and I thought, oh, okay, well, you know, what kind of boring makeup job is it going to be? And it was this hunky guy with just a little loincloth, and he was a hot guy. I thought, I was so shocked. Suddenly it became transpersonal. And suddenly what Jung calls, what C.G. Jung calls an enantiodromia occurred. The thing that gets so intense in one extremity suddenly flips into the opposite. It's like a shock of it flipped it into its opposite. And I had been feeling really miserable and awful. So suddenly it was like the shock was that that was on account of what I ultimately call external factors. That's sort of like homophobic factors that's upping hideous or impulsive. Which is, if you know the novel Frankenstein, which I've also presented on, I've written a paper on it. That's also the thesis around that discussion as well. People are not able to be empathic with the creature who never gets a name in the novel because they always find it to be so, quote, hideous or beyond the pale. And it's really referencing how they can't get beyond their reaction. If you think again about the place where you react that way, about yourself. or you just want to shoot it. So like in the novel, that's all they want to do with the creature. They want to kill it, they want to burn it, they want to shoot it, they want to destroy it, they want to screaming. Everything but anything positive or accepting, we might say, more generically. Much less a more pro attitude, supportive attitude. So, that's a, let's see, do you remember what I was just saying?
Frankenstein.
You were talking about Frankenstein, and you know, like how people wanted to shoot them, and
What was the reason for
You had to do it in the master's thesis.
and watching it on television.
Oh, that's it. Thank you. Yes, I was watching on the TV. Say what happens. They've got so many threads, and I start to follow the threads, and pretty soon it's like nowhere at all unless there's someone to keep the central thread or what's an important thread. And thanks for reminding me, or was mentioning what was going on in terms of what's apt and the thread that's being woven right now. And what's apt is in the TV show, and they're unwrapping the Frankenstein. I'm in this miserable place, and it's a cute little guy, rather than being somebody awful or in an awful mask and the usual creepazoid junk stuff they do. And it was such a shock because I'd never seen anything like that. Absolutely, it was so unexpected. That was what was so shocking. If it wasn't that I'm a bright fellow, you know, even in my super depressed state. Since childhood, I'm a kind of aficionado of horror and fantasy and science fiction. I know all that kind of genre stuff. And it was shocking. It was really shocking. I've never seen anything like that. And being in such a vulnerable state, it flipped me into this other condition that I'd never known before. And it was in this other condition that suddenly I realized that what was so icky about what I was feeling was how I'd been conditioned to feel so icky. And I was in a great struggle with the essence, more the essence of my own person. So I'm no longer in the idea of concepts about essence, let's say, or arguments or debates now. I'm in a struggle about my own beingness. And it's about, am I claiming or not claiming the essence of my own being? So it's now introvert, this notion of essence, but it's this question of just being in the moment. And there's a place where I not only don't get it, I'm completely out of it. I have to go actually on a journey inside to actually get to this place where I feel like I'm connecting with my own essence of being in the moment. I have to go on a journey, and it becomes more and more politically of a sort that when it comes out in forms of like writing and stuff becomes more and more, let's call it pro-gay. Gay supportive to a strong, strong degree. So by the time of this stuff coming to me, it's because it's so strong, because the thing itself is so intensely interested in coming through how I'm interested in it. And how I'm interested in is inviting it to come through me more and more. And first of all, how I'm being, and then how I'm being every day. And it's this beingness that I'm realizing that is, whenever I desire a guy, whenever I'm feeling an interest in another guy, whenever I'm genital interest or desire or feeling or pull or urge or any level of like that, including when I'm looking at myself, I'm thinking about myself, I'm just feeling my own body and I feel erotic or turned on. There's a person there. In the turn on. So this was taught me. So it's like trying to share with you how I was back then in ways that were teaching me and trying to convey to you what it was like, kind of like a little bit on the inside. So otherwise it's just the printed words. And you have those, you all have access to them. This is a book that's long out of print, but it can be gotten on the web. There are places to get all these things, and stuff like that. And I'm sure in a historical sense, that although it is already documented in various ways and will continue to be, but to fill in the cracks, so to speak, is historical opportunity right now. We make history right now by recording a Thursday 35-year history. So I live with a kind of passion that's hard to describe now, okay? In those years in general, and the people around me and the world that we lived in was not this world, all the different kinds of worlds that we're normally used to now. It's very hard to describe how it was. Everyone was pushing for an alternate way of existing in life, in their own personhoods, in society, in the midst of unjust power, in the different kinds of ways that people would define it differently depending on what their allegiances were, and there were factions and subgroups.